I am deeply convinced that our peace of mind and the joy we get out of living depends not on where we are or what we have or who we are, but slowly upon our mental attitude. Outward conditions have very little to do with it. For example, let's take the case of old John Brown, who was hanged for seizing the United States arsenal at Harper's Ferry and trying to incite the slaves of rebellion. He rode away to the gallows sitting on his coffin. The jailer who rode beside him was nervous and worried, but old John Brown was calm and cool. Looking for the Blue Ridge Mountains of Virginia, he explained, "What a beautiful country! I ever had an opportunity to really see it before." Or take the case of Robert Falcon Scott and his companions, the first Englishmen ever to reach the South Pole. Their return trip was probably the cruelest journey ever undertaken by man. Their food was gone, and so was their fuel. They could no longer march because a howling blizzard roared down over the rim of the earth for 11 days and nights in a wind so fierce and sharp that it cut ridges in a polar ice. Scott and his companion knew they were going to die, and they had brought a quantity of opium along for just such an emergency, a big dose of opium, and they could all lie down to pleasant dreams, never to wake up again. But they ignored the drug and died, singing ringing songs of cheer. We know they did because of a farewell letters found with their frozen bodies by a searching party 8 months later. Yes, if we cherish creative thoughts of courage and calmness, we can enjoy the scenery while sitting on our coffin, riding to the gallows, or we can fill our tents with ringing songs of cheer while starving and freezing to death. Milton, in his blindness, discovered that same truth 300 years ago. The mind is its own place and in itself can make a heaven or hell or a hell of heaven. Napoleon and Alexander are the perfect illustrations of Milton's statement. Napoleon had everything man usually crave: glory, power, riches, yet he said as Helena, "I have never known 6 happy days in my life," while Helen Keller, blind, deaf, dumb, declared, "I have found life so beautiful." If half a century of living has taught me anything at all, it has taught me that nothing can bring you peace but yourself. I am merely trying to repeat what Emerson said so well in the closing words of his Easy on Self Reliance: "A political victory, a raise in rents, the recovery of your sick, or the return of your absent friend, or some other quite external event, raises your spirit and you think good days are preparing for you. Do not believe it. It can never be so. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself." Epictetus, the great Stoic philosopher, warned that we ought to be more concerned about removing wrong thoughts from the mind than about removing tumors and abscesses from the body. Epictetus said that 19 centuries ago, but modern medicine would back him up. Dr. G. Canby Robinson declared that 4 out of 5 patients admitted to Johns Hopkins Hospital were suffering from condition brought on in part by emotional strain and stresses. This was often true even in cases of organic disturbance. Eventually, he declared these trace back to maladjustment to life and its problems. Montaigne, the great French philosopher, adopted these 17 words as the motto of his life. A man is not hurt so much by what happens as by his opinion of what happens. And our opinions of what happens is entirely up to us. What do I mean? Have I the colossal effrontery to tell you to your face when you are moved down by troubles and your nerves are sticking out like wires and curling up the end? Have I colossal effrontery to tell you that under those conditions you can change your mental attitude by an effort of will? Yes, I mean precisely that, and that is not all. I'm going to show you how to do it. It may take a little effort, but the secret is simple. William James, who has never been top in his knowledge of practical psychology, once made this observation: action seems to follow feeling, but really action and feeling go together, and by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling which is not. In other words, William James tells us that we cannot instantly change our emotions just by making up our minds to, but that we can change our actions, and that when we change our actions, we will automatically change our feeling. Thus, he explains the sovereign voluntarily path to cheerfulness. If your cheerfulness be lost, is to sit up but cheerfully and to act and speak as if cheerfulness were already there. Does that simple trick work? It work like plastic surgery. Try it yourself. Put a big, broad, honest to God smile on your face. Throw back your shoulders. Take a good deep breath and sing a snatch of song. If you can't sing, whistle. If you can't whistle, hum. You will quickly discover what William James was talking about, that is a physically impossible to remain blue or depressed while you were acting out of symptoms of being radiantly happy. This is one of the little basic truths of nature that can easily work miracles in all our life. I know a woman in California, I won't mention her name, who could wipe out all of her miseries in 24. If only she knew the secret. She is old and she is a widow. That said, I admit, but does she try to act happy? No. If you ask her how she is feeling, she says, "Oh, I'm all right." But the expression on her face and the whine in her voice say, "Oh God, if you only knew the trouble I've seen." She seems to reapproach you for being happy in her presence. Hundreds of women are worse off than she is. Her husband left her enough insurance to last the rest of her life, and she has married children to give her a home, but I've rarely seen her smile. She complains that all three of her son in law are stingy and selfish, although she is a guest in their homes for months at a time, and she complains that her daughters never give her present, although she hoard her own money carefully. For my old age, she is a blight on herself and her fortunate family. Money, but does it have to be so? That is the pity of it. She could change herself from a miserable, bitter, and unhappy old woman into a honor and beloved member of the family if she wanted to change, and all she would have to do to work this transformation would be to start acting cheerful. start acting as though she had a little love to give away, and instead of squandering it all on her own unhappy and embittered self. I knew a man in Indiana at Anglet of 1335 Street, Tell City, Indiana, who is still alive today because he discovered this secret 10 years ago. Mr. England had a case of scarlet fever, and when he recovered, he found he had developed nephritis, a kidney disease. He tried all kind of doctor, even quack, he informed me, but nothing could cure him. Then a short time ago, he got other complication, his blood pressure, so he went to a doctor and was told that his blood pressure was hitting the top at 214. 214. He was told that it was fatal, that the condition was progressive, and he had better put his affair in order at once. I went home, he say, and made sure that my insurance was all paid up, and then I apologized to my maker of all my mistakes and settled down to gloomy meditation. I made everyone unhappy. My wife and my family were miserable, and I was buried deep in depression myself. However, after a week of wallowing in self-pity, I said to myself, "You are acting like a fool. You may not die for a year yet, so why not try to be happy while you are here?" I threw back my shoulders, put a smile on my face, and attempt to act as though everything were normal. I admit it was an effort at first, but I forced myself to be pleasant and cheerful, and this not only helped my family, but it also helped me. The first thing I knew, I began to feel better almost as well as I pretended to feel. The improvement went on, and today, months after I was supposed to be in my grave, I am not only happy, well, and alive, but my blood pressure is down. I know one thing for certain, the doctor prediction would certainly have come true if I had gone on thinking dying thoughts of defeat, but I gave my body a chance to heal itself by nothing in the world but a change of mental attitude. Let me ask you a question. If merely acting cheerful and thinking positive thoughts of health and courage can save this man's life, why should you and I tolerate for 1 minute more our minor glooms and depression? Why make our lives and everyone around us unhappy and blue when it is possible for us to start creating happiness by merely acting cheerful? Years ago, I read a little book that had a lasting and profound effect on my life. It was called As a Man Thinketh by James Lane Allen, and here's what it said. A man will find that as he alters his thoughts towards things, and other people things, and other people will alter towards him. Let a man radically alter his thoughts, and he will be astonished at the rapid transformation it will affect in the material condition of his life. Men do not attract that which they want, but that which they are. The the divinity that shapes our ends in is in ourself. It is our very self. All that a man achieves is the direct result of his own thoughts. A man can only raise, conquer, achieve by lifting up his thought. He can only remain weak and abject and miserable by refusing to lift up his thought. According to the book of Genesis, the Creator gave man dominion over the whole wide earth, a mighty big pleasant present, a biting big present, but I am not interested in any such super royal prerogative. All I desire is dominion over myself, dominion over my thought, dominion over my fear, dominion over my mind and over my spirit. And The wonderful thing is that I know that I can attain this dominion to an astonishing degree anytime I want by merely controlling by action, which in turn control my reaction. So let us remember these words of William James. Much of what we call evil can often be converted into a bracing and tonic good by a simple change of a sufferer's inner attitude from one of fear to one of fight. Let's fight for our happiness. Let's fight for our happiness by following a daily program of cheerful and constructive thinking. Here is such a program. It is entitled Just for Today. I found this program so inspiring that I gave away hundreds of copies. It was written 36 years ago by the late Sybil Patridge. If you and I follow it, we will eliminate most of our worries and increase immeasurable our portion of what the French call la joie de vivre. Just for today. Number one, just for today, I will be happy. This assumed that what Abraham Lincoln said is true that most folks are about as happy as they make up their mind to be. Happiness is from within, it is not a matter of external. Number two, just for today, I'll try to adjust myself to what is and try and not try to adjust everything to my own desire. I will take my family, my business, and my luck as they come and fit myself to them. Number three, just for today, I'll take care of my body. I will exercise it, care for it, nourish it, nor abuse it, nor neglect it, so that it will be a perfect machine for my bidding. Just for today, I will try to straighten my mind. I will learn something useful. I will not be a mental loafer. I will read something that require effort, thought, and concentration. Number five, just for today, I will exercise my soul in three ways. I will do everybody a good turn and not get found. I will do at least two things I don't want to do, as William James suggests, just for exercise. Number six, just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can dress and becoming as possible. Talk low, act courteously, be liberal with praise, criticize not at all, nor find fault with anything, or not try to regulate nor improve anyone. Number seven, just for today, I will try to live through this day only not to tackle my whole life problem at once. I can do things for 12 hours that would appeal me if I had to keep them up for a lifetime. Number just for today, I will have a program. I will write down what I expect to do every hour. I may not follow it exactly, but I will have it. It will eliminate to past hurry and indecision. Number nine, just for today, I will have a quiet half hour all my day and relax in this half hour. Sometimes I will think of God as so as to get a little more perspective into my life. Number 10, just for today, I will be unafraid, especially I will not be afraid to be happy in to enjoy what is beautiful, to love and to believe that those I love me. If we want to develop a mental attitude that will bring us peace and happiness, here is rule number one. Think and act cheerfully, and you will feel cheerful. Chapter number 13, The High Cost of Getting Even. One night years ago, as I was traveling through Yellowstone Park, I sat with other tourists on bleachers facing a dense growth of pine and spruce. Presently, the animal which we had been waiting to see, the terror of the forest, the grizzly bear strode out into the glare of the light and began devouring the garbage that had been dumped there from the kitchen of one of the park hotel. A forest ranger's Major Mertindale sat on a horse and talked to the excited tourists about bear. He told us that the grizzly bear can wipe any other animal in the western world with the possible exception of the buffalo and the Kodiak bear. Yet I noticed that night that there was one animal and only one, that is grizzling, permitted to come out of the forest and eat with him under the glare of the light. A skunk. The grizzly knew that he could liquidate a skunk with one wipe of his mighty paw. Why didn't he do it? Because he had found from experience that it didn't pay.